Sorry. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 15th, 2023 Police and Fire Commission meeting. And we'll start with our call to order. And then the second item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 3 on our agenda is the approval of the February 28th, 2023 Police and Fire Commission meeting minutes. Those were in the packet. Any thoughts, questions, or comments on the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve the February 28th, 2023 Police and Fire Commission minutes.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Minutes are approved. Agenda item number 4 is public appearances for non-agenda items. No one in the crowd? No one online? Okay. And item number 5, report from Police Department. Chief?
Myself and Deputy Chief Matt Leahy that will be discussing some of the overtime data that we're giving you. I'll start off with the staffing report. In this staffing report, we had 3 additional resignations for the Dane County Sheriff's Office. That brings us down to 11 vacancies, down to 44 currently sworn for an authorized strength of 55. We have 3 yet on field training. 3 of those will be off by May for sure. I think within the next week or so, we'll have one of those 3 off field training. In addition to that, we did have 1 on limited duty who is back full duty as of today. So currently, patrol positions on field is 14. We do have 2 individuals that are eligible to retire this year. One has tentatively set a date for May, and one has not set a date yet, and then maybe till the end of summer, if not in the fall. So that's what we have for the staffing. If you want to move on, if there is any other questions on that, we'll get into the overtime report.
The vacancies are actually 14. Is that right?
The vacancies, 11.
Oh, it is 11.
Unfilled positions, meaning officers that cannot work by themselves, so they're in field training or vacant positions. So that creates 14 positions. The 3 that are in field training, you can't count them as being able to go out and patrol on their own.
Okay. Thank you.
And Chief, and you may be getting or planning to get into this, but for the 3 resignations, those who have gone to Dane County, what are you hearing as the reasons for it?
Financial. Dane County Sheriff's is offering up and over $110,000 for lateral transfers. They have several vacancies that they have there. I'm told they're about 400 sworn. I think it's, the amount of money that they're offering is most cities in the area are not going to be able to afford to pay those salaries to our sworn. Although I don't know how sustainable that's going to be for the future of that organization either. We are doing some things on our end to assist. We just were able to, we got approval from council to provide a referral bonus. The referral bonuses are going to go to a referral for hire and a referral for a lateral transfer. Those are $3,000 and $5,000 that will disperse to the a member of the city employee that brings in that referral. I do agree. I think the leadership in the department and in the city hall floor all agreed to reward the ones that are sticking around and working and showing their loyalty to the city versus offering that, like many cities are, a signing bonus to bring somebody on that has not proven themselves. So we're looking at investing. We're also looking at there's going to be salary savings from the vacancies. And we're currently developing a plan that we're going to propose to the city to use some of that salary savings as a retention bonus to the membership that's here. at looking at without, completing the plan, is to provide those that finish off the year. If it's the calendar year that they're working, which is 2023, and we have officers here that are going to be filling in these vacant positions, working the overtime, they should be rewarded with some of that salary savings, which means that salary savings, we don't have a definitive amount. I can give you an estimated amount on 8 vacancies in January, or about $44,000 in that month. So there is some monies. Now, we're using some of that money for other things in the, that are needed within the organization. So that's a false number to say you're going to have that every month. However, there is a substantial amount that we would be able to look and determine at the end of the year and disperse that amongst the membership that is sticking around.
That's comparable to Dane County, or is it merely similar to is it just salary?
Well, there's benefits in salary. Through the WRS, most law enforcement employees, no matter what department you work on, you're going to get very similar pension benefits. It's some other things that the cities are able to offer. It's the salary that the city's able to, or the county's able to offer. It's a signing bonus that other cities or counties are able to offer. And there are some cities that offer a longevity plan. But if you look at per hour pay, Dane County law enforcement is pretty even in that amount.
And health insurance and vacation time, is it all comparable? Or, I would love to see that, because I think we focus a lot of times on an hourly rate when there's a lot more that goes into each employee, and if our benefit package could be increased and.
Yeah, we recently did a comparison of different municipalities in the area and what they were paying their police officers. Our 10-year officers maxed out $84,000, I believe, and Dane County, it's $110,000. So that's the big difference there. Our health insurance is already no co-insurance, no deductible, so it is the best plan out there. Family coverage for as little as $70 per month on our lowest cost option. So Dane County offers very similar. They're in the Wisconsin Retirement Pension Plan. They have great health insurance. So, but they have longevity pay. They'll match their sick leave that they have here. So there's those two things that are big in attracting officers from here.
Sarah, have we ever looked into an education incentive for our police officers?
Absolutely. It comes up every time we negotiate a new contract.
I'm new here, so I've been here
Yeah,
for
no,
only
it's
1 year.
It's a really great question.
Just because the referral bonus is a great start. And I mean start, I overemphasize that. That's wonderful, thankful to have it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we have to make it makes it really challenging for our employees now to go out amongst their colleagues and try to find somebody to come here.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go make 110 versus 85. So
Right.
But it's a start, and I'm so happy that our city council recognized this discrepancy and recognizes the real need to help.
There's other thoughts, other things we can do. There's retention bonuses. That might be the next
You guys
thing.
are probably, the city, we are probably saving $80,000 a month.
Well,
11 vacancies.
It's $44,000 a month just for 8 vacancies.
8 vacancies.
So now
and
we're at double almost.
we're at 11 now,
Or
so you can throw in
14.
another 11.
11,
Yes.
Okay.
11 total vacant positions.
okay. So, and that was in January, that's statistic. So yeah, we're saving, I don't think people realize the big picture. We're saving $44,000 a month, and we're doing more with less. This isn't sustainable. And as a Fitchburg resident, I need basic necessities, to live here and be satisfied, so.
Some of the things that I think we get caught up on is the hiring piece. It's kind of unique that in Dane County, the pool of candidates that you're looking at, Sun Prairie, and you're going to hear this in some of our closed session items we're going to talk about, but people who are applying for law enforcement departments are not applying for one, they're applying for multiple. And it's almost like we're all have the same pool of candidates. So if you come up with a list of 25 candidates. By the time you're done with the process, you're lucky if you get 3 or 4 of them. Some of them,
Yeah.
just because the other departments are going to beat you to it, or they can't complete the process. If you want to talk about now, bigger cities, they're going through the same. It takes about, from where I came from, it took about 400 or 500 officers to get a class of 60.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I understand.
but we're all going through the same pool. So the thing is to go outside of this pool of candidates to find some others that are there. But when you look at who's going to do that, Sarah is a whole team of 1.5.
Right.
And then
right.
you have our department that currently, with the leadership, we're wearing multiple hats
Yes.
to fill in the vacancy. So who's going to do the recruiting outside of your comfort zone, outside of state, where the benefits do mean something here? Because everybody gets them.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing, Chief, that struck me as you said, that most municipalities won't be able to afford what Dane County is paying. And it is, I think, a long-term kind of reckoning coming for Dane County. But it's also a choice of priorities. And I think our council met last night and spent, I think it was like $800,000 on beautiful, kick-ass tennis courts for our city. And I think it's a question of priorities within our city, and we're at roughly 80% capacity with our police department, and that is, to me, a greater priority than a lot of the things that we've been spending our money on lately. So I hope a lot of attention is paid to the retention bonuses and other opportunities to get our priorities straight in the city.
Who's going to show up to those tennis courts when somebody gets into a scuffle? Pretty unnecessary.
Other thoughts or comments on the staffing report before we get into the other details? All right, Chief or Deputy?
All right, so I'll act as Chief Morales' translator tonight for the overtime documents that were presented. So we currently use, and I just want to preface this information, the old reports or the previous reports that were sent were me counting every day, every number of overtime, and with the staffing scheduling software that we have as Telestaff. Recently found out one of our lieutenants is a little bit of a guru when it comes to Excel. So he was able to take the reports, the information that Telestaff can provide in a report, and organize it a little bit better and give a much more clear picture of what kind of overtime our staff is working. Now, of note, this is overtime that every employee that utilizes Telestaff puts in. That could be a records clerk, that could be a CSO, that could be a dispatcher, sergeant, officer, detective. So it's not just officers, it's everybody that utilizes Telestaff, which would not include command staff. Actually, CSOs don't even use, well, they would use Telestaff if they're documenting some sort of overtime, but they use a different software for documenting their timesheets. So this information, the first page, is all of 2022, just to kind of give a year, 10,000-foot view of the overtime. First column that you'll see is for every instance that an employee would go on to Telestaff, they would mark if it was comp time, if it was an order in, if it was an overtime request. There's specific notations for that in Telestaff. As you can see, the bold comp time earned 1.5, that would be what they're requesting as far as the type of overtime they're getting. And then they're asked to put in a reason for the comp time requested or the overtime requested. And then you'll see underneath there, you'll have evidence, dispatch, department meeting, all of the reasons for the request. So in each of these, the count of events table, the table on your left, is the type of overtime requested and the reason for that in the entire calendar year of 2022. So there was a total of 4,065 instances that an employee for the police department that utilizes telestaff went into telestaff and requested overtime and provided a reason. And then the middle column is just an average number of hours per instance that overtime was requested for that particular thing. So that's a little bit of a confusing column. But then the final column over on the far right is the total number of hours that an employee, for instance, if you look at order in overtime for dispatch coverage, there was a total number of events of 6 times, a total amount of hours of 24 hours that somebody was ordered in for dispatch coverage. So that's all of 2022, giving a total amount of overtime or comp time requested of 8,460 hours. Go ahead, Tom, if you have some questions like you might have.
Yeah, so, and thank you for this. This is really helpful. So the order in overtime is essentially involuntary overtime.
It's all involuntary stuff. Yes, sir.
And there were, that first column under count of events, there were 381 instances in calendar year 2022 when someone was ordered to come in against it involuntarily.
The 381?
Yep.
But
And
there's
that-
also the order in comp time, which is right above it, which is 12 instances as well. So it would be 393 instances of an order in overtime. Now, whether or not the employee chose to get comp time for it as opposed to overtime pay, that's up to them.
Gotcha. So they have the opportunity as an employee to get paid dollars 1.5 times, or they can say, I'm gonna take paid
bank
time off.
Correct.
1.5 times.
Correct.
My wage, okay. And then, so if we go back to order and overtime on the far left under count of events, that resulted in 1,128 hours of overtime that our police force was working.
Yes, whether it's sworn or professional staff that chose to put the information into telestaff.
And then on the second page, it's 2 of 6 kind of in our packet. There were a grand total of 8,460
Total hours,
total hours of some form of overtime.
correct. Whether it was comp time, order in comp time, voluntary comp time, shift extension comp time, shift extension overtime, shift coverage, order in, whole variety of different types of overtime and reasons for it.
Okay. And then if, I don't know what you consider in law enforcement to be a full, year of hours, but if you consider 2,080 hours is a typical.
It's 1950 for an officer.
1950, all right. So 8,460 total hours divided by 1950 is one full-time equivalent police officer. That's 4.3 police officers worth of overtime that we have worked in calendar year 2022.
Correct.
Is that, okay.
If we're going to do it just by officers, yes.
That's a big number.
It is a big
Right,
number.
and that's what I think that there's significant value in seeing, put it into people.
So if you just wanted to scroll down to the third page of this,
Can I just back up?
Go
one?
ahead.
So the extension of shift, how is an extension of shift different than an order in?
so an extension of shift could be the officer got a late call at 2:30 in the afternoon, and they extended their shift to 3:45 to finish up whatever that call was.
Okay.
That's an extension of their shift.
Thank you.
Do you guys ever order a shift extension? So do you ever ask someone to stay?
Yeah, we'll ask people to stay if there's a weather-related event. We'll say, hey, you're going to be ordered in for the next, hour and a half to get through rush hour traffic. But that would be more shift coverage than an extension of
Okay.
shift. Any questions on the 2022 spreadsheet?
I'm worried about 2023. Is that next?
Well, yeah, if we start looking at 2023, we'll see kind of a interesting trend that we got here. So for January and February only, that's this next document. And if you can see in the total sum of hours, we're already at 2,645 total hours of overtime for just 2023 alone. And we only had 8,000 some hours in all of 2022. So it makes sense because we are so many officers down that it would make sense. So it's just one of the trends that we're seeing so far into 2023. And then if you go down to the fourth page, this kind of just breaks it down just as far as the code type and then the code total amount of hours. This is just the reason. It's not the type of overtime. So these are all the reasons in 2023 so far of how many extensions of shifts there have been. And there's 276 extensions of shift for a total of 362 hours of total overtime. And then the final page is that same information, just of all of 2022. The final page is all of 2022.
Page 9 is 2022.
Yes, correct. So it just gives a little bit more, much more detailed information related to our total overtime. I know for the last year, I've been just doing order in overtime for essentially shift coverage for the order-ins. This gives all of the overtime that police department members are working. So I'm just seeing, these are just prototypes right now. I still want to kind of work on them just a little bit, just for labeling purposes as far as what month it is, those types of things. But is this more of the information that you would prefer to see as opposed to just the order and stuff for future reports?
Yeah, I think I
very
enjoy this.
captivating.
This is good. This is important because it does break it down, and that's what we need to know is where the hours are going.
Gives you a little bit more realistic
Yeah.
picture.
And that's what we need because that's where the numbers will come from in the long run. Your call volume, that's increased, right? Your call volume?
As far as this year so far, I mean, we
Yeah.
have
Town
had
master.
an increase in some of the calls. Some of those are officer initiated.
Right.
The reason for the increase in calls is because of officer initiated calls.
I think that's important for others to see. I know we get,
monthly report.
Chief Morales sends that to us. Just like we do with the fire service, I think that's important to see call volume, so people can see where the resources are going and where we are in a trend as far as that as we continue growing.
One of the things that I've been messaging and just learning more and more about Fitchburg is there's a call volume, but in essence, a good thing about the city of Fitchburg, it's relatively safe. The problem is you have 34 square miles of coverage. And that's where, as I explained this, and I've been speaking individually to alders, community leaders during community meetings, what this means. We had in our community meeting from last month, Commissioner Russell was there. I stated, when you have 34 square miles, okay, the call volume is one thing that you look at. There's a number of different variables that you look at what proper staffing is. And even if we were at full staffing, what that means and what package of policing you're getting for the city. But now when you're reduced to under minimum staffing levels, if I have an event that's taking me on the farthest south end of the city, a lot of these events are taking place in your more densely populated areas of the city, which means either you're going to spend more time there and no time covering other areas. And that's what we need to have or identify some type of what is our minimum going to be? Because our minimum historically has been 4 squads, 4 officers. But when you start dropping at these levels, you may end up dropping under that. What calls for service are we not going to respond to? And can we even respond to an emergency if I have an officer for whatever reason on one corner of the city and now there's a backup on the other area of the city, that's a lot of geography to go through to get there. Hence, what we've been reviewing and pulling our hair out is when you have an incident where there is a pursuit, you want to say, don't go because you're on the other side. But if you're the only backup, what are you going to do?
You gotta go.
Mutual aid, is that something you guys call, is that documented? How often we're having to call mutual aid for help? Is that what you call it, mutual aid? I know.
Mutual aid is something, but you got to be very careful with mutual aid because mutual aid should be for emergency situations. Obviously, if there's a pursuit and it's coming in from other cities and they're coming into our city, we're all going to work together. But you got to be very careful at that because you just can't use it for anything. And that's been asked. Well, if you don't have enough officers, another city can come in and help out with taking assignments. And
Doesn't
that's
work
not
that
the
way.
case.
It's not the case in police. That's how it sometimes works in fire, right? That's weird.
But if it may work in fire.
For an
but-
emergency.
Yes, but policing is somewhat different. The city, and I've stated this because I came from an area where now cities are start saying, I pay for police services for the city of Fitchburg or whatever city I'm at. I'm not going to send my staffing or my officers to go
Exactly.
support calls for service in another jurisdiction.
Doesn't make sense.
So that.
I sure
is
can't
gonna be
afford to lose my police officers
Right.
where I live.
Especially when cities are struggling with staffing throughout the state.
And so what happens when somebody calls 911 and they do need service and maybe we have officers that are already at certain calls? Is it, you're going to have to hold on, we'll be there as soon as we can?
Yeah.
I mean, is that the reality of
Depending
it?
on the type of call.
You prioritize the calls as far as-
Prioritize a call, yes.
Okay.
And there are going to be times when it's an emergency.
Right.
But I think we're using that too much, and sometimes we're going to realize that help may not be coming.
Is that tracked? Is that like releasing services or releasing other officers to respond to cars? Is that, or respond to calls, is that a tracked statistic? How often we're having to do that?
So we can we can pull information from the CAD as far as when the call was received and when an officer was dispatched. I mean, it takes a little bit more time to kind of pull that information out. But for a regular basis, like when we actually respond to a call or how long it takes us to arrive on scene, it's not always a normal statistic that we need to pull.
And we should be able to query when mutual aid or when a squad has responded. We can pull those numbers, and we just have to search it and query it. But to say we're tracking how many, we haven't. But again, those are things that we can do.
Okay.
Might be useful.
From a manpower perspective, is it easier to produce this, or is it easier to produce the prior looking report? This is all. Okay.
The Lieutenant McCarthy has created an Excel document that he can basically take this information and plug it into whatever formulas he's created and can pull this information fairly quickly. It's just a lot to look at, so I wanted to make sure you knew what you were looking at.
When you look at this, what numbers are alarming to you? I know you guys zoom in on a couple hot numbers, like what is alarming? What are you guys looking at that speaks volumes to you?
Well, for me, I've seen these numbers for the last 18 years, so it's not alarming necessarily. But it gives you, the commissioners, a better idea of, it's not just the order in overtime that's the story. It's all of the overtime that department staff does work on a fairly regular basis. And I guess from things to look at right now is if you did want to go back to those previous reports as far as or to look at the chief's staffing reports and to see if there is a correlation between the number of staff down and the number of overtime hours worked, or if our staffing was up and our overtime hours were actually up. Maybe ask some questions as far as, were there any special events? Were there in-services? Were there just a lot of training that we were working on in that particular month? Will give you a better idea of, because I've been saying this for a while, it's the whole equation as far as how many hours of overtime officers are working. It's a pure mathematical equation. If we have more staff, we're going to have less hours of overtime. But when you look at the numbers and you see staffing up and overtime hours are up, hopefully there's an explanation as to why.
A situation.
Situation,
Right.
training, in service,
More things happen,
large calls, those
Right.
types of things.
but the trends.
The
I
trends,
think-
from just looking at 2023, the first 2 months, the fact that we're over a quarter of the way to the same amount of hours that we're in all of 2022 is a little bit concerning. But we're also the most vacant positions that I've ever seen at the police department
Sure.
right now. So it makes sense.
What concerns me in a broader sense, overall picture, is the amount of hours an individual officer's working.
Yeah.
And that can, it's different generation. I hate to say it, but I am the old person in the, on the block now. And for me, it was like, you got no choice, you got to work it. But now in policing, you don't have to work. If you don't like it, you can leave or go somewhere else where there's less overtime, or go work the jail
For 110,000.
for 110,000. And that's the problem is, we're working on keeping our officers motivated to say, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel. But if we, coming into the summer, this is also overtime in the winter when it's snowing, where you have, school shutting down, when things are pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Summers are going to have more activity, and that's anywhere in Wisconsin, your most activity comes in the summer. So how are we going to go into the summer and handle the increase in calls for service, the increase of activity, and then requiring our officers to stay here when, again, it's a different generation when they say, I want a work-life balance. It's not necessarily chasing the money. Although some people are chasing the money for doing less work,
Sure.
It's not going to be chasing the money to get that overtime.
Sure. And I just keep hearing you guys say responding to calls. And I think there's like a correlation here. Like, I think Fitchburg is at such a desolate time that, like, we are a department that just responds to calls. Like, how can I, when there's 3 of me, go initiate a traffic stop and potentially be tied up because he's got drugs, and now I need a canine, and now I need to drive him to jail, and X, Y, and Z. So, like, I just don't know how our department can even, like, function. Like, I think the overtime, like, if we had accurate staff, I think the overtime could have, like, a fair shake at going up, because now our officers, like, we've got a few officers to respond to calls, but we have some officers out doing, like, some real work, like stopping cars, or, like, getting into stuff, like real police work. Like, are you guys just, are we just like a respond department, at this point? Like,
We've been using our officers. There is sometimes when there is a drop or lower. It's been again the winter, and the officers are using that time to do some activity. But our detectives, and mind you, I've been in here a year. Our detectives have been doing some of that proactive activity, working on. It's not new technology; it's old technology, but it's current where we're using technology on. It's called the NIBIN's technology, National Information. NIBIN. It's a National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and we're using that technology to handle some of our gun-related
Yeah.
offenses. That's the proactive work that you've been seeing. We've been following up. I think in the last couple of weeks, we recovered in 2 investigations alone up to 10 firearms.
it's incredible
last,
that you're even
few
able to
weeks.
do this, given the state that you're, like, I have to just say thank you, like, to all of the police officers that are currently here, and, like, our command staff, for, like, just thank you for being here, and, like, for pressing on. Like, I don't know the answer, but, like, just thanks for showing up.
Well, I can tell you that what I've seen is what's surprising, and I sent an email out, is everybody's been pitching in. And that's from the command staff to the frontline supervisors to our front line. They've been showing up for work. I'm very happy with the staff that has stuck around, that's not leaving. And
Right.
they're showing up for work. They're doing some good work.
Which is
all
amazing.
Of them. So
Thank
thank
you.
them enough.
All of you. Like, as a taxpayer in Fitchburg, like, my tax bill hasn't gone down. And, like, when I pay my taxes, like, I'm really satisfied for paying for, like, what do I need? Basic necessities out on my farm. Well, I need a firefighter if the barn starts on fire, and I need a police officer if someone robs me. I don't need a park in town. I surely don't need a tennis court. I don't have time. Like, I'm farming. And so, like, just these as a taxpayer and, like, as someone, like, that's just a resident of the city of Fitchburg, like, I'm just gonna consider my money is going to you two, like, and your folks, because, yeah, thank you. We don't really need any of this other, like, there's a lot of work to be done here. And like, when you're talking about going to like, I don't know if you're talking about going to 3 for minimums, but I heard you say we're at 4 for minimums, and we might be less than that. Like, I heard that. That's terrifying to me,
Yes,
because 4 is not enough.
all right. If we continue to see more drop-in in staffing, we have to consider that.
Chief, what about the mental health of your officers? Are you starting, and maybe you may not see the signs now because folks are stepping up, but now you got to think about the future, right? 6 months from now, a year from now, where what they're going through now is impacting them in such a way where it's a big-time mental health issue down the road.
That I can say as a general sense, and in the 30 years of service, you can sustain this for periods of time, but not for extended periods of time. Then you get into the burnout stage, and that's where mistakes start happening. And that's when when the mistake happens, that's when you have the the microscope over that organization saying, "What are you doing wrong?" But nobody looks at what has been going on.
And that was a big reason why we wanted to see the overtime, because we wanted a history
Right.
when these things were happening, when we were being, informed of certain situations. What was the prior?
Right.
What led up to this? How long were the officers working? What were we asking of these officers? And I think that's still so important as we run short to continue making sure that the mental health and the hours are sustained. But right now, like, everybody's in fight mode, and it's not going to be able to be sustained. So, and I think this, is it safe to say that this is the municipalities around Dane County? It's not just us. Are we the only department that's running this short? Sun Prairie, Middleton, are they comparable in that aspect?
No.
The only city in Dane County that's comparable with
there's
Fitchburg
that.
is struggling, and it depends on what time of the year that they're short, is Sun Prairie and
think
Fitchburg are
Middleton's
the both that are struggling with this. And on top of that, though, Sun Prairie and Fitchburg are the fastest growing cities
Right.
in Dane County. So it's hard to keep up when you have some vacancies and the
haven't
city's
adjusted.
growing, where now you still need to grow on top of what your sworn strength should be.
The, like, full staff. So if we had those 11, did we make any adjustments to that number in preparation for the annex of the town of Madison? Or is that number old?
There was 2 additional before I came to the city of Fitchburg that were 2 additional positions that were added to get you a sworn staff of 54.
Okay.
And this year, we added a sergeant so that we could have 24/7 supervisory coverage.
Okay.
But now we had a sergeant leave.
Exactly.
So we're back to that vacancy again.
Dang, yeah.
Other thoughts or questions on the details on the staffing report?
No, thank you. I think that's great, and thank you to Lieutenant McCarthy for
Yeah.
doing that. I think that's great. I'm sure.
He put
a lot of time
this
into it.
data needs to reach eyes far beyond ours. I'm sure you guys can sense that, like, we get it. If this was up to me, we would be taking action this minute. Like, we'd be doing something.
I can tell you, I've been having one-on-ones with our elders. I've met with several of them. Some of them I have yet to meet with. And I've been showing them not just what we are for vacancies, but what our expected growth plan is, our plan on growing. There's 2 things that Fitchburg Police Department, and I would say, what are our challenges? It's staffing and the new police station. So we're looking at those 2 things, and that's kind of what we've been also educating the public in our monthly meetings that we're having. We got to work on the attendance from the community. We're going to continue to go out there and show up to the community, but I think the community needs to see it as well.
Yeah.
Don't schedule them on Thursdays, because it's going to snow, right?
Oh, yeah,
Don't
that's right.
schedule anything Thursday nights anymore.
Not
We still got a
anymore.
couple more weeks left, so.
Seriously.
All right. Well, thank you, Deputy and Chief. Anything else on the staffing report?
No.
Then agenda item 5B is a opportunity for closed session. Does anyone want to take us into a closed session?
Pursuant to section 19-.851C Wisconsin statute, the commission will move into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation for any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, more specifically, to discuss the current sergeant eligibility list and make hiring recommendations for police officer.
I second that.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor of moving into closed session, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed? None? All right, we will go into closed session. Sorry. So we're back in open session. From closed session, we'll move on to item 5C, which is action out of closed session.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the chief's recommendation, and we have 5 conditional offers that we'd like to extend for the position of police officer.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, sounds good. We are done with agenda item 5C. Chief, anything else from the report from the police department?
No, I just want to thank you for your time and the long explanations of what we did. I'd rather inform you more and make sure that you're well informed. So I appreciate your time and patience.
We appreciate you and your transparency, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to agenda item 6A, staffing report from Chief Pulvermacher.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. The staffing report starts out with our activity report. One of the things that's, I think, important to note here is one item that we're going to do moving forward is because of the fact that the city's sort of moving away from annual reports, we're looking at doing a monthly newsletter that will include certain things that we've done over the past month. It gives us the ability to recall what has been done at what time and produce some type of synopsis at the end of the year. It will include a lot of this information, but what you're seeing in front of you is a lot of the things that we report to the Department of Safety and Professional Services, and that's why it continues to be shared to not only the Police and Fire Commission, but also the council. And then what I started to do, because of the fact that I was made aware of the fact that although this is information that's readily available, sometimes our firefighters were saying that they didn't necessarily have access to it, which I think that was just based on the fact that they didn't know where to look. So instead, we're just sending it to them every week in their email. So they have access to it, and they can speak to some of the things that we have done and some of the things that we're sharing. The numbers associated with overtime and mandates is on there. We didn't have any mandates in February, which is typical. One of the things that we're anticipating in the coming months, I have 2 firefighters that are going to be on FMLA, one for the birth of a child, and another one is going to be having a procedure done. So we do anticipate those numbers to go up. We're working with our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises as best we can. The other items that are associated with this report have to do with a lot of the things that we're going to be reporting on a little bit later. The further explanation for CPAT, that was moved to the next meeting, so there is more information. I was able to get in contact with the IAFF. They will likely be tuning in for that meeting along with some other information that was requested. We'll just share it all at that time. And then the last thing that you'll have on that report has to do with calls for the month. We were able to work with the GIS program to be able to actually use an actual filter for the month of February. So that is all the responses for the month of February. And that's the report for now, unless you have any questions.
All right, any questions for the chief? Okay, then we'll move to agenda item 5B. I'll move to, into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, more specifically, to make hiring recommendations for Division Chief of Inspection, Prevention, Investigation, and paid-on-call firefighters.
I will second that.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, we'll go back into closed session. All right, we are back to the Police and Fire Commission meeting, and we are now out of closed session and moving to agenda item 6C. Any action from closed session?
I would like to make a motion to approve the chief's recommendation for division chief of inspection and create an eligibility list for 6 months.
Any second?
I will second that.
Any discussions? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay. Any other action coming out of closed session?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the chief's recommendation for 6 conditional offers for paid on-call positions.
Paid-on-call firefighters. I will second that.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, any other action out of closed session? Then we are moving to agenda item 7. Any announcements?
I do have one thing that I'll just put out there. One of the things that I would like to consider is with the fact that we had some we had a very powerful intern list this last time. We had some really qualified candidates coming out of high school. If some of these candidates do not land on other internships, I'm going to want to see if there's any availability to have an open enrollment to maybe bring them on to the department. Right now, I want to make sure that they're doing what's right for them and trying to get where they need to be from a career perspective. But I also want to make sure that we are providing opportunity to those who want to work for Fitchburg specifically. So that will be something that we'll keep our ears open for, and I'll bring to you next month, especially if I think that's something of value. And maybe what we do in the future is have an open application period for paid on call, paid on premises in general. So as they present, we can make those decisions as far as what we want to do.
Thank you. I think that's fantastic in the best interest of the department at these trying times.
And then one other thing that came out of the intern program, and if you want to see this, I can send it to you, but some of our career firefighters wanted to address what they were seeing during the ride-along so that they could share the experiences and whether they felt this person was a good fit. So we did a 2-part evaluation form that we now have available. It's not scored right now. I'm going to try to develop a rubric so that we can actually score the ride-along. But what it does do is it actually follows along with our mission, serve, learn, respect, and lead, and it has identifying factors that maybe suggest that they're a good fit for the organization based on our mission statement. And then the other thing is they get to fill out an evaluation on us. So what was their experience like? Did they get their questions answered? Do they want us to follow up with them? All of that is available on the form so that we can have more interaction with those that have expressed interest in our organization. So good news with this one is the 6 that went through the ride-along we're offering positions to. And in the future, that may have some bearing as far as those that maybe aren't the best fit.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I just want to make one announcement. Friday is St. Patrick's Day. I want to wish the city of Fitchburg and you all a happy St. Patrick's Day.
And drive safe.
Thank you.
All right, any other announcements? Okay, then agenda item number 8 is adjournment. I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Thanks. We are adjourned.